Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about clauses, sentences, punctuation, and also your process essay just briefly. The process essay I'm wanting to see turned in on Monday. That's going to be the due date. I do have a helper with me today. She insists on being on the desk with me. So one of the issues that I see a lot in papers has to do with commas. So really to back up and see where we need to have commas and punctuation, we have to understand the way sentences are constructed. So we're going to go over that today, and I hope that will help you write your process essays with some good sentence structure. So getting started, you're going to hear me say a lot, independent clauses and dependent clauses. So that is what we are going to be looking at. Semicolons, I probably won't really touch on, but you can write successful papers without semicolons, but I will mention that briefly. So an independent clause is really just a group of words that can make a complete sentence on its own. It contains a subject and a verb and expresses a complete thought. So that's kind of how we define a sentence, really. So Jim studied in the sweet shop for his chemistry quiz. That's a complete sentence, an independent clause. We have a subject and a verb, expresses a complete thought. A dependent clause is a part of a sentence that contains a subject and a verb, but does not express that complete thought. And it cannot be a sentence on its own. So when people have dependent clauses just sitting out there with a period at the end, those are called sentence fragments, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. Dependent clauses are often marked by a dependent marker word, like when Jim studied in the sweet shop for his chemistry quiz. We don't know what happened. So a dependent marker word is a word added to the beginning of an independent clause that makes it into a dependent clause. When Jim studied in the sweet shop for his chemistry quiz, it was very noisy. So here on this slide, you can look through those. There are some common dependent markers. So oftentimes, if you start a sentence with one of these words, be looking to see where you are going to need a comma to set off that dependent clause. Because the thing about combining dependent and independent clauses, you got to be thinking about punctuation to connect those. So two types of words can be used as connectors at the beginning of an independent clause. So we're going to look at coordinating conjunctions, and those are your, and, but, for, or, nor, so, and yet. So we often combine two independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction. Just be sure that you use a comma before that. I do also see, though, people putting commas where they're not needed. So sometimes people think, oh, that I'm using and or but, so I need to put a comma before it. But what you need to look for is, do you have a complete sentence on either side of the conjunction? So if you have a sentence and you have and in the middle and you're not sure if you need a comma or not, think of it like an equation. And so look on both sides of and. Are they both equal? Are both sides of that sentence complete on their own? Could they stand alone? And if that's the case, you use a comma before the conjunction. Independent marker words, you can look over those. I'm not going to touch on those quite as much. Man, my cat's name is Millie, by the way, in case you're curious. She's very needy. So connecting dependent and independent clauses. So we have subordinating conjunctions. And this is where you can start constructing complex sentences, have an independent clause and a dependent clause, which sometimes is called subordinate. So the students acted differently whenever a substitute taught the class. Whenever a substitute taught the class, the students acted differently. So be looking for, when you start the sentences with words like this, be thinking about, where am I going to need a comma? You can look at that list there for some common subordinating conjunctions. So the other thing that I see quite often is a comma splice. And that's when you take those two independent clauses, so these two sentences that could stand on its own, and you just put a comma between them. You can't do that. If you're going to connect those two, you have to have comma conjunction. So and, but, or, nor, for, so, right? The semicolon comes into play here because you can combine two independent clauses with just a semicolon, but most people opt for the comma conjunction because that's what they're familiar and comfortable with. So you can do that. So just be aware when you're using a comma, it's often, it is handy to think about why you're using it. We're pretty good at recognizing that there's a pause in the sentence and thinking you need a comma there. But if you can try to understand the clauses and how punctuation plays a role in that, it can help you be more confident in where you're using punctuation. So here are some examples of comma splices done correctly. So incorrectly is, I like this class, comma, it is very interesting. The problem is both clauses on either side of that comma could stand alone, right? Those are still complete sentences. So I have to put a conjunction after that comma to make it correct, or, see, you have options. You could just make them two sentences, or you could use a semicolon to connect the two, or comma conjunction, or you could just rewrite it like the third option next to the ors there. I like this class because it is very interesting, or because it is very interesting, I like this class. So you have options on how you are constructing your sentences. The flip side of that is when we have complete sentences and different clauses, but we never use any punctuation. So those are run-on, or also known as fused sentences. I have two independent clauses not separated by any form of punctuation. Okay, so we need to make sure that we are properly punctuating things here. So run-on sentences or fused sentences. Incorrect would be, my professor is intelligent. I've learned a lot from her. See, the problem is we have two complete sentences there, but there's no punctuation involved. So we could put a period between them. We could put a semicolon. We could put comma conjunction, or, rewriting it in a different way. As I mentioned earlier, fragments happen by trying to treat a dependent clause or other complete thought as a complete sentence. You can't just mash some words together and put a period at the end. You have to be aware, am I writing a complete sentence? Can this stand alone? Does it have a subject and a verb and express a complete thought? So you can combine that with another sentence or, rewrite it. So incorrect, because I forgot the exam was today. Now in context, if there are other sentences around this, I'm sure it makes sense, but grammatically it's incorrect. So there you see a couple options. So I hope that's helpful when you are thinking about constructing sentences. As far as the process essay goes, I went through and I looked at all the pre-writing worksheets that were turned in. On some of yours, you'll see in the comment section just kind of food for thought, because some of the essays, I just want you to be aware that you have enough content to write about. Remember, it's 5 paragraphs long, and you are explaining how a process works. Keep in mind the thesis statement at the end of the first paragraph should basically explain or say what you are going to explain and how many steps it takes to do it. So refer back to information on Canvas if you need to. If you have any questions writing the essay, please let me know. Otherwise, I would like to see those turned in on Monday, and I will get a Dropbox set up for that. So I hope you guys have a lovely weekend. Thank you.